Welcome to the Dynasty Playbook, your source for Dynasty fantasy football knowledge and mostly a bunch of hooligan and shit talking. But occasionally there's some knowledge mixed in. Guys, this is 2 weeks in a row that we've had the whole crew together. I feel like this is some sort of record lately. How you guys doing tonight?
Doing great, feeling good, ready to do this.
Yeah, another. It's late for me. I'm an old man. Got to be at work early in the morning. So get this thing going.
Yeah, I can feel you on it being late. Um, I don't have work in the morning, but I have a bedtime now, and it's weird. I never wanted one growing up. I never wanted one like when I was partying, but now I have no idea how to survive at 11:30 at night. But let's. My first thing I wanted to hit on was Fake Pigskin just put out their draft guide. This publication they put out is massive. There's people writing on all 32 teams. The reason I bring it up is I contributed a little bit to it, but the amount of people that contributed to it is just massive. There's a lot of other articles interspersed in there. There's redraft rankings, there's dynasty rankings, there's IDP rankings, and it is free. So I highly advise you guys go over to Fake Pigskin, check it out, and just get a feel for what they got going on over there. And I know it really wasn't in part of the plan, and it's not really dynasty information, but I figure I'd give them a quick plug. And for a real week in review, how about our real hooligan of the week, Jason Pierre-Paul, wanting to buy a U-Haul van worth of fireworks and blow up his friggin' hand? I mean, I remember I got the Voxer message about it on the 5th, and I didn't understand what people were talking about at first. All I heard was somebody blew off his hand, somebody blew off their hand, and somebody told me it was Pierre-Paul, and my response was just, fuck. 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 Because that's all I could think. Like, how do you do that? How are you on the verge of a second massive contract, and you're just gonna piss it all away by being stupid? And I know somebody's being stupid. I made some sparkler bombs back in my day, but come on, man. Really?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. On a personal level, it is incredibly disappointing. JPP is my most owned IDP, and a lot of that's because I was scooping him up last year when his value was kind of in the toilet, coming off injury. It just kind of sucks. I mean, it remains to be seen what it's going to do to his game on the field, but there's no way it's a positive. There's I mean, you can put a little bit of a silver lining on this thing somehow or another, but you can't put a great positive spin on it. I don't know, and that's the last thing we needed is to lose a legit 4-3 defensive end. There aren't very many of them, and he's one of the best. So, yeah, this just sucks.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say, he's probably the second best 4-3 D end out there after Quinn, huh?
He was, yeah, I mean, with Chandler. I guess Chandler's kind of this hybrid, but technically that would be what he is. But I don't know, man. It just sucks. It's hard for you guys that don't play IDP to wrap their head around what this is. This is essentially Julio Jones going and blowing off a toe or something. It's literally that big of an impact on the IDP world.
Yeah, at least Randall Cobb. I mean, I don't know, per finger how much that impacts his sack totals, but I have to imagine it's not going to be non-impacting. I feel like at least to some extent it's going to hurt his game.
Yeah, I mean the index finger is a pretty important finger. He got a lot of strength in that finger, right? I mean, using it, having one less finger to try and use the leverage and get against it. So I think it'll have some sort of effect, but who knows how big it's going to be. I don't think we've ever seen anybody go from having 10 fingers to 9 fingers playing in the NFL. So Yeah, I agree. It's a big hit on IDP. It's kind of crazy that that would even happen. He took a hit. He definitely wasn't getting valued as if he was the DN2 last season. Like Tyler was saying, he was picking him up on the cheap. Well, relatively cheap. Um, but yeah, it's crazy. Can't believe someone would even do that. You know, you got so much money, so much time. You could have had someone else lighting that firework, bro. I don't know. Something, man. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I said Tyler says that there's got to be a silver lining, and I guess it's that the initial report was wrong and that he didn't blow off his thumb and two or three other fingers. I guess the silver lining is it's only one finger, and he's not just walking around with a stub, which I gotta imagine that would impact his sack totals probably a whole lot more.
Yeah,
But
I don't know. Maybe this is finally Demontre's chance to do something, do anything. Don't shake your head. All he has to do is get better in run defense and put on about 30 pounds and pull a rabbit out of his ass and all kinds of other stuff, and then Demontre Moore can finally be on the scene.
yeah, I shake my head, but I liked Moore coming out, and I think we've both just heard Eric Breeze go on and on about how it's time to just get off the Demontre Moore train, and I think I'm finally starting to buy in,
No,
even
but
though I still
he's
got him.
he's like 22 years old, man. I mean, Demontre is young. I think he was drafted. And I don't have it in front of me, but I think he was drafted at the age of 19, maybe 20. Super, super, super young, and everybody knew he was going to be a project, and he was going to struggle and run defense. And he didn't have enough weight in his ass. But wow, we've completely digressed here. But I am still holding out some hope that Demontre can become legit. And I don't know. Does JPP start the season? Does he play? I have no idea. It's just such a super weird deal going on there. But a little bit of a door's open for more right now.
Yeah, I think we'll go ahead and leave it at that and move on to our college player discussion for the week. And our guy for this week is a guy we were actually hoping came out in this draft class is DeQuell Williams, is a wide receiver out of Auburn. He's gonna be a senior this year, and he's one of those guys that it's really hard to find the holes in his game because you're immediately drawn to the stuff he can do rather than what he can't do. And in terms of just his biggest pro is his athleticism is I don't even have to see him run a 40 or do a broad jump or anything like that, and I can already tell his measurables are going to be exceptional just because he is a ridiculous athlete. I think he's, 6'2", 216. He's clearly got the frame to put on more weight, which will be helpful for him, help him in traffic against, higher tier defensive players in the NFL. He's really good over the middle. That's an extremely impressive part of his game. He's got that Marcus Colston to his game where just he's that safety valve for a quarterback. If you need a third down, he'll get it for you. He may not get a ton after the catch, but he'll sacrifice his body, he'll make the catch, and he'll call it a day. But there's obviously some holes to his game. He's just a piss poor blocker. He tends to take a lot of plays off in that aspect. You can see a lot where he'll start the play off with a lot of energy and realize it's a running play and just kind of let everybody else run around and he won't pay attention for a while. And then ball security was the biggest thing as an actual wide receiver skill that stuck out to me, and I hope that's something he can address this year, and I'll definitely be watching that closely to see if he does.
Yeah, I'm not quite as excited about him as Drew is, but I mean, he definitely has some talent. I agree, he's very athletic, very strong, but he didn't seem extremely fast or even quick in the short distance to me when I was watching him on tape. He caught a couple passes, like a slant where he tried to turn back and things like that, where it just didn't seem like he was breaking away. He caught a couple posts I saw that, he caught in between the defenders and had a chance to, all green in front of him, got tripped up. I mean, he's not like getting run down by somebody, but he doesn't have that breakaway speed where he's going to go ahead and hit you a home run or anything. Wasn't great hands, but they weren't terrible. He did have some good catches. Weren't all great though, and I saw one or two drops. I think not too many though. That's always nice not to see a legit drop. Anytime he dropped it, there was definitely a defender right there, either putting a hit on him or getting his hands in there. So I'll give him that. Overall, he was pretty impressive, but I like to see a little bit more pop, a little bit more potential in it, and I think he's going to be a good receiver in the NFL. I don't know if he'll be a huge fantasy guy. I think he'll be a possession receiver like Colston was, but he might need that quarterback that can really get it to him pretty often.
Yeah, he's kind of a tough eval for me. A lot of that's due to what his role was in the offense. He lined up in the slot more often than not, and most of his work was over the middle, which was very impressive over the middle. Super, super tough. He doesn't get alligator arms. He knows he's going to get hit. He still gets the ball, brings it in, does what he has to do. He's willing to do the dirty work over the middle. As far as his blocking, I thought he used his body really well. He had an understanding of what needed to be done. He just didn't engage, and like Drew said, he got really lazy. I think the 2015 season is going to tell what's going to happen with this kid. I need to see a lot more of him. I'd like to see him outside more. I'd like to see a more expanded route tree. Let's see him run some outs because basically he just runs drags, skinny posts is mostly what he did from what I saw. So I'd like to see him get outside and really be able to expand on that. This is the kind of kid that I can fall in love with. And we're going to have one or two things happen here. He's either going to absolutely fly up the draft boards next year. If he goes out and has a good season and just kills it, he should be the number one target for that team. Or he's going to just stay where he is or possibly regress and just really drop down. The fact that he didn't come out is somewhat telling to me because, I mean, clearly if the NFL thought he was going to be a high selection, he's coming out. Everybody's coming out. You're going to get paid. So there's obviously some things that both he and the NFL and his coaching staff felt he needed to work on to become a more complete receiver. But the raw tools are there. The athleticism is there. The long stride is there. He's got all that going for him. So this is a guy I'm going to have firmly in my sights next year, and I want to see as much of him as I possibly can because this is the kind of guy I can get behind.
Absolutely, and I think one of the things I'm really looking forward to seeing is him playing without Nick Marshall, because there were some really just errant throws that made it even more difficult to evaluate who Williams was as a player. Because I mean, when you can't even get him the ball on a screen pass, that makes it really hard to evaluate who you are as a wide receiver. And I had the same problem with old boy from UCF after Blake Bortles left, Perriman. Because it was just you had to go back to the Bortles tape to even get an idea of who he was. Because quarterback skill plays a part. You can't fully evaluate him if he's not even being put in a position to play as well as he can. I really want to see him utilize his size more. He's big into body catching. I want to see him really, be able to high point the ball more, or be able to kind of, use his size to beat out defenders rather than just, try and beat them on a route or try and get a better angle, because that's not going to get it for you in the NFL. These are going to be higher caliber cornerbacks, and they're going to have as good as ball skills as you are. So you're going to have something that's going to give you an advantage against them. And I mean, his size is an advantage, but if he's not using it, then he might as well be 5'11". He might as well be Julian Edelman. All right. So I guess we'll move on to our next piece. I wanted to do a little bit of strategy and commish type questions. And the first one we want to talk about was kind of setting up your leagues. And Tyler and I talked about it a couple weeks ago about what our ideal, lineup settings are, scoring setups are. So we're not going to delve too much into that. But the biggest, to me, the biggest, most important thing in setting up a league, besides who your league members are, is having a well written out constitution. You want to make it to where people can just get in there and if they have a question about how waivers run or how trades go or when certain things are happening, how rule change suggestions will be voted on. You want to have those be clearly outlined in the Constitution, and I've been in leagues where there's just not one at all, and it makes it very, very difficult to be in the league and kind of handle what's going on when you're constantly having to go to the commish and really kind of try and flesh out what the league is doing. So to me, that's key.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many little things like how does the playoff seeding work, and how do we determine draft order? Do you use possible points? Do you use record? What are the tiebreakers? Is it head to head? Is it power ranking? There's just so much out there, and me as a commish, I want to have the bylaws there so when somebody comes and asks me something, like, yo, look at the bylaws. They're right there. It pretty much answers every single thing, and it's also good as a commish when you're going back and getting your draft order set and getting the playoffs set. That way you remember, hey, this is how we're breaking ties in this league. This is what we're doing in this league. So, yeah, a well thought out, well written out constitution is a big thing, and it also, when the league is initially starting, it helps. Like if there are issues in there that the guys don't like, hey, let's look at this. Let's tweak this. I'm never one to be the guy that says, nope, that's just the way it is, deal with it. It's everybody's league. So if there are things in there that people are uncomfortable with, now's the time to do it. Read the bylaws, let's look at it, make changes as necessary, but it is the de facto Bible for the league. That's the way things are going to go. And Dynasty leagues, you can't really change that. Once that ball's rolling, it's really tough to stop it. It's a slippery slope to get in there and try to change things. So, yeah, that's huge for me, whether I'm running a league, joining a league, any aspect of it. It's just really nice to have things laid out.
Yeah, I think a constitution is super important as well. I was in a couple leagues that didn't have one for a while, or just didn't have one at all. Weren't talking about getting one. It's just super important because, like Tyler was saying, anything that comes up, playoff seeding or tiebreakers or something like that, you always want to be able to just have a very consistent rule that you don't have to be like, oh crap, what was it for this league? Or like have one sheet of paper that just the commissioner has and he gets to read off of it and tell people what's going on. I think it's just very important to allow yourself, a set thing that everyone can look at any point in time. When you have to cut down rosters, like when the draft normally is, usually those dates aren't set in stone, but it's something like first week of May or for something like that, to where at least or like weekend after the draft or something like that. It really depends on per league, but it's nice to have lots of dates set where ahead of time, and you give people a good heads up to know when they have to have their cut downs and when they have to be active on the league and do things, such as paying dues. If you don't have a set date and people just kind of get to flux whenever they want to pay, they pay, and whenever they don't, oh crap, I'm not winning this year, I don't think so, I'm going to kind of skip out and hope he doesn't catch it or something. Also weather websites help with that, obviously, but doing a constitution where you say a set date, that way you can find new owners if that's what you're going to end up having to do, because the guy's just not going to pay. The Constitution is a big deal. I think I will not join another league if it doesn't have a good, well thought out Constitution that you can see covers all the bases. It's important. You need it.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to touch on from kind of more of the commissioner side as well is if you vote on something, a rule change, what have you, commissioners, don't forget to edit your league constitution to reflect that. And I'm terrible about it, and I just thought about it as we've been talking and realized I'm behind on doing it in at least one of my leagues, and I need to probably go and take care of that and make it to where people can, instead of trying to dig up 4 or 5 month old polls, they can just go to the Constitution and see, what the changes were. But with that, we'll move on to another another little discussion area we want to talk about, and that's the idea of injury proneness. And I'm gonna let Tyler kick it off for us because he and I were kicking around some thoughts on this before we started.
Yeah, so it seems to be almost taboo to call a guy injury prone in some circles. And I'm not even talking about a specific injury or a specific player, but if a player has repeatedly shown the inability to play 16 games, and I mean repeatedly, and we can go, and we don't even necessarily have to refer to 16 games. We can go back to their college career for some of these guys that never finish seasons. They're injury prone. And it may not even necessarily be injury prone. Maybe they're just not very tough. Maybe they don't have the fortitude to say, hey, I'm not feeling it. I'm not 100%. I'm not going to go. There are several players that I'm kind of subtweeting here, I guess, so to speak. But yeah, there are several players that fit within this profile that they're just unattractive players to me. Uh, they've shown enough to me that I can't count on them to give me a full season, so I'm not going to invest highly in them. And to just write them off and say I don't want to discount them because of injuries, I think you may be doing yourself a disservice. There are plenty of guys out there that can tough it out and will play all 16 games and have shown the ability to do so year in, year out, and nobody's 100% in the NFL. Nobody's 80% in the NFL probably by midseason. It's who's going to suck it up and play. So there are a number of guys that I have given my personal label of I just don't trust this player to be a consistent week in, week out, year in, year out performer for me. And I discount them accordingly.
Yeah, I'd say I'm probably more in the middle on that as well. I definitely understand the idea of players been injured season after season, and it's never very serious injuries, but he always ends up sitting out at least a game, probably 3 or 4 games in a season. I'm going to consider that player to be an injury-prone player, but 1 or 2 seasons or even 3 seasons in a row of being injured and having maybe a very serious injury or a lightweight serious injury or out for a few weeks, I'm not going to discount a player based on that. I think it definitely has to be a full career thing for me to start taking it more into effect. If he has 2 or 3 bad seasons, sometimes it just happens. There really are freak accidents. I mean, so I'm not going to discount a player just based on that, especially if it's like, 2 broken arms or 2, torn ACLs or something weird like that, which would be really hard to come back from, 2 torn ACLs. Whew. But, I mean, that's not something I'm going to discount a player from. I'm definitely going to judge him a little bit less when they come back from a serious injury. I'm going to think, they're probably not going to be quite the same. But I won't call him injury prone until it's, a season long or career long, more than a season long, a career long thing for a player.
Yeah, and I think it's very situational, kind of from player to player. I mean, you look at Gronk, and Gronk has missed at least more than a few games from serious injuries in a couple of seasons. But I would not call him injury prone because if you look at the circumstances around his injuries, they're fluky injuries that any NFL player would have gotten injured on. So I would be hesitant to call him injury prone aside from his back problems, which are not going to essentially cause injuries now, but just shorten his career in the long run. But it's not even guys who miss time. Look at like Calvin Johnson. Calvin Johnson consistently throughout his career has shown up on the injury report with nicks and little injuries here and there. And early in his career, he would constantly play through them, and that shows toughness. And it's starting to show later in his career that he's less able to play through them, and he is injury prone because these same little injuries have shown up consistently from season to season. But with age, you become less able to bounce back from it quicker. Same thing with a player like Jimmy Graham, who, I mean, you'll be hard pressed to find a season where he hasn't played a good chunk of his time injured, and he'll play through the injuries. And down the road, later in his career, it's probably going to come back to bite him. Even if it doesn't, turn into more significant injuries in the long run, those same injuries, those same minor injuries are going to still be present, and it's going to become harder for him to play through them as he gets older. So that's one of those things that I like to keep aware of as well.
And you know what you've gotten with those two particular individuals the last couple of years are the decoy games, which
Oh
are
Jesus.
worse than death. Because I'm the type, yo, I got Calvin. If they say Calvin's going, Calvin's in my lineup. I don't care. Jimmy Graham's in my lineup. Arian Foster's in my lineup. But you get that. It's there. It's happened enough. Arian had that game a few years ago. Or was it 2012 or 2013? We're like, yeah, Arian's going. And he goes in and takes a snap, and nothing happened. And the next thing you know, he's in his sweatpants. And you got one snap out of him. So yeah, that's kind of a sidetrack thing, but oh god, decoy games are the worst. Is there anything worse than a decoy game? And especially when the game isn't live and you're not able to watch it. I mean, and you're just kind of watching the stat tracker, and you're like, yeah, Calvin hadn't had a catch in like 20 minutes. What's going on? So then you go and check the social media sites, which I try to avoid on game day. And you find out, yeah, Calvin's just running around or taking every fourth snap or whatever it is. So brutal. So brutal.
Yeah, I think the only thing worse than the decoy game is leading up to the game, and it's a Monday night game, and you have no idea what they're gonna do, and even if you grab their backup, they decide they're gonna play last minute, and it turns out they're a decoy, and you're relying on them. You had the chance to not start them, and you still do it anyways. It happened with Brandon Marshall last year. It happened with Alshon Jeffrey last year, and it made me want to cry.
Yeah, I
And
got
it's
burned on
the
the Brandon
worst.
Marshall game. I didn't play him, and he caught like two or three touchdowns. He had a crappy game, but he got two or three touchdowns. And then I
Yeah,
got burned by Morgan Burnett on a Monday night. Yeah, that's a whole different area, but that is brutal. Brutal.
yeah. And you guys have anything else you want to hit on with this? Because I'm sure we could probably expound on this for another half an hour.
I think I'm good.
All right, let's move on to our IDP spotlight for the week, and we're gonna talk about one of my binkies. That's linebacker C.O. Moore. He was one of my favorite stashes last year, and he hit pretty well. I think points per game, he was the linebacker 10 in the leagues that Tyler and I are in. In the scoring, it's non-big play. It's pretty balanced. But I really like him as a high end LB2 for my rankings, and I can only see him getting better with time. As Khalil Mack gets better, they're gonna have to give him more attention, and that just the consistency in that defense is gonna get better as they get stronger players. I mean, there was nobody there besides him and Mack last year, really. I mean, Tuck was a shell of his former self. And who else did they have out there last year?
Oh, they didn't have anybody. They had who was the guy they were rolling out at middle linebacker every week that was just awful. And then Tyvon broke his foot an hour into the season, and yeah, it was just pretty messy. And then Co himself is hurt. It just got kind of ugly. But I was a little late to the Co Moore party. He was probably in my 30s last year in the rankings. So I still have several shares of him, not as many as I would have liked, and it's not too late to go get him now, but because he's fixing to be on the scene. A lot's been made of they signed Malcolm Smith, and Malcolm Smith's going to take snaps away from Co. I don't think so. I'm not going to go as far as to say it isn't going to happen, but it isn't going to happen. CO's the will there. And even on third down, Malcolm Smith's a great third down linebacker. So, I mean, this is what I think is going to happen on third down. I think Mac's going to drop down, put his hand in the dirt. I think Lofton's coming off the field. I think Malcolm Smith's coming in. It's going to be Malcolm Smith and Co on third down. So I think I don't know if we necessarily found his ceiling or his floor. I think we found who he is. I think we found a guy that is going to be borderline LB1 and a guy that you want in your lineup for a long, long time because he's super young, super athletic. He's in a nice division for IDP and IDP scoring. With Denver and KC, I mean, they're good matchups for linebackers have been historically. So just a fantastic buy right now, and I think he's like my LB12. I guarantee you, if you're doing a startup today, you can get him at LB20 in almost every league, unless you're in one of these super cagey leagues.
Yeah, and I feel like that assessment on what Oakland's going to do on third down is pretty accurate because Lofton cannot do shit in coverage, and that's probably it's probably a big factor in why the Saints let him go because in terms of being a two down thumper, he's as good as just about anybody in the NFL. But get him in there on third down and it's sketchy. So getting him off the field on third down is, I feel like it'd be a smart move, and it makes way more sense consider why they'd bring Malcolm Smith in there because it gives their defense a more consistent look throughout the game. Which Oakland's really lacked consistency lately, and this is what they need.
Yeah, I think C.O. Moore's a pretty good backer. I was just looking at his stats here in one of the leagues we're all in. Of course, Drew owns him. But week one, he had 23. He had a 21 week, another 20, a couple 15s, a couple 12s. I mean, this guy, he missed 4 weeks, but he had a hell of a season besides that. I mean, he still ended up being 31st overall linebacker in this league for us. The kids, I agree. I think he's just going to come onto the scene right now, and with Khalil Mack on the other side and him getting better and going to draw more and more attention, I think they have a good combo, at least just in those two alone. So I definitely think he's a buy low if you're getting him around 20th linebacker overall right now. It's a good steal. I mean, I think this kid's going to easily rise up the charts really quickly this year. If he can stay healthy, I mean, he's going to go that much farther. So definitely someone I like. If I can get him at a good deal, grab him.
All right, and I think that's going to do it for our IDP Spotlight. Let's move on to our submitted questions for the week. And our first one comes from One Man Army on Reddit. And his question is, why the hell is everyone drafting Hyde so high? For reference, he was DLF's RB13 by ADP last month. He says, I'm a 49ers fan, and this year it is certainly going to be a running back by committee. Sure, he'll get the most touches, but there's no way that Bush, Hunter, Davis, and Cap as a rushing quarterback will allow Hyde to get a ton of work in. I doubt Bush lasts more than 2 years, but if Hunter returns to form, the 49ers will have the deepest backfield in the NFL, which is actually a problem for Hyde. He says he's high on him, but at his draft position, I don't see any value. They've drafted a running back in every draft for the last 5 years, and he just doesn't see the long-term value. He wants us to know what our opinion on the 49ers backfield moving forward.
I mean, Hyde's the guy to have there, and wow, it is the great divide between Carlos Hyde and the next guy, who's Mike Davis for me. So right now his ADP is about 41st overall, so we're looking at a mid fourth rounder, RB13. I'm all about that. The guys that are going to be going in that range at running backs: Lamar Miller, T.J. Yeldon, Arian Foster, that group right there. So
Mark
you either
Ingram.
you got guys whose workload is every bit as in question, or you got guys who are old, just old. So Carlos Hyde for me, I mean, I don't do my rankings like that on the offensive side, but I got to think he's higher than RB13 for me. I'd probably say, just off the top of my head, RB9, 10, something like that. He was fantastic coming out, was a monster in the preseason. His yards per carry last year were super screwy, but that's a funny stat because of the situations he was brought into. He's a lot of times he's not in a situation where he just needs to get a few yards. Let's run a dive and get a few yards and get you back off the field. Bring old man Frank Gore back in. Reggie Bush's old as hell. He's another one of those injury-prone guys. I hate to go there, but I mean, if there was ever a guy that you can't count on, his name is Reggie Bush. Kendall Hunter never was. I didn't even like Kendall Hunter in college. I mean, I thought he played on a great team and a great system, and he looked really good, but he had free run because those Okie State teams were for real. Mike Davis is a guy that I really like, but Mike Davis on a talent level with Carlos Hyde, it's not particularly close to me. So I don't think he's going too high. If anything, I'd say he's going about right, and I'd be willing to pay more for him than what he's going for in terms of startup price right now.
Yeah, I would definitely say it's a young running back thing. When you see a young three down back coming out, he gets a lot of hype. I mean, you saw what happened with Christine Michael. His hype went through the roof. That guy still hasn't even got a starting position. So, I mean, I think it's just kind of the way things go. If you see a young running back with lots of talent, you think a good situation's coming up. And obviously, this one's more concrete than what Christine Michael had. I mean, he actually has a legit shot at RB1. I don't see why he wouldn't end up being RB1 in that offense. But he's still unproven, so I do, still take that into consideration. But I don't think he'd be being drafted ridiculously high. I mean, a little bit high, but that's what you kind of expect with the age and the running back position. Getting the chance to start early, he's only going to have a few years. People are going to pay a high price to try and get him now, rather than wait until after this season and then pay even more trying to get him probably.
Yeah, and I mean the comparison with Kristen Michael, I mean, yeah, they both got upside, but the difference is Hyde had legitimate production at Ohio State. He looked good, and he was, I mean, they relied on him heavily in that offense. And even if they don't use him as a three down back in San Francisco, I have no really qualms about him being a high producing running back, even just as a two down thumper, and then bringing in Mike Davis and Reggie Bush on third down. I think Hyde is more than capable of producing really just strong numbers on first and second down because their passing game is not going to be even up to what it was in the past. I mean, what are their options now? Torrey Smith, DeAndre Smelter, and Bruce Ellington. And I mean, I love DeAndre Smelter, but I'm not expecting him to be anything close to being year one ready. He's a project, and he had a pretty rough injury at the end of the season too. So for me, I would not have any concern about, especially about Hyde this year. You could invest in him, and he could shoot up to be a top five running back by the end of the season, and that wouldn't surprise me all that much. And I had him as a top five running back at one point this offseason before I started ranking my rookie running backs because I think the talent's there. He was he was my number two in terms of overall talent last year, behind Crowell, and he didn't have the character concerns. He had the draft pedigree, which I mean for running back is not. I mean, second round at this or third round at this point is considered draft pedigree for running backs, which is a weird thing to say, but like Tyler said, Hunter, even if Hunter returns to whatever form it was, I feel like he's in danger of not even making the final roster, depending on how the roster shapes up. Bush, they might drop Bush if Davis looks good enough early on. They don't have a ton of money tied up in him. And like Tyler said, I mean he's been injury prone for a decade, and it's not going to change. Nothing. He's not. He's not even as good as he was with, early on in Detroit or like he was with Miami. He's a shell of his former self. So to me, that was insurance for third down because Hyde. That's his biggest question is whether he can produce on third down, and if he can't, I'm still not concerned. Like I said.
Yeah, in today's day and age where 15 to 18 touches a game is a workhorse, that's your lead back. And I think we could pretty much guarantee Hyde for 15 touches a week, right? I mean, that's got to be pretty locked and loaded. And he's, 23 years old? It all adds up to a highly valued dynasty back. And in this community, if you're waiting for proof, you're never going to get ahead, man. If you're not willing to speculate and take on some risks, you're never going to build that dominant roster because you're going to be paying full price for everybody at all times, and you're going to have aging veterans that retire on your roster unless you want to sell them for pennies. So it all adds up to Carlos Hyde, to me, is being valued, I mean, absolutely spot on. At least in my estimation and in my experience, this is just the way these things work. And I think he has the talent that it's not that big of a risk, really.
Yeah, and honestly, I would be more than comfortable drafting him way higher than RB13. And granted, I'm extremely guilty of favoring youth to the point that it's almost crazy, but like I would take him over Adrian Peterson and Jamal Charles and Matt Forte, especially in a startup. But even in a competing team, if I'm not relying on just one running back to provide for my team, I would have no problem trading any of those guys for Hyde straight up. And some people are gonna say that's crazy, but I think everybody who's gonna think that was a bad idea is gonna look crazy in a year for passing on it.
Yeah, and it's all about how long do you want your window to be. If you're just making that one big push and you just want that championship, come hell or high water, Matt Forte is probably your guy. But if you're looking through it through the long-term lenses like we do, I mean, it's pretty clear that we all share a similar dynasty mentality. The younger guy's always the better play, in a situation like this, especially at running back. And I don't want anybody that's going to give me 1 or 2 years in the early rounds or even the mid rounds. I just don't. That's just not an investment I'm going to spend. I got no problem picking those guys up super deep because it's either, a veteran or a guy I'd probably cut or crazy fly or whatever. But, yeah, especially at the running back position. If you're 28 years old, you're dead to me if you're not already on my team.
So true. So true. The age of running back, it just happens so fast. You see great running backs go to crap, unfortunately, way sooner than you feel like they should be. So, I mean, youth is going to be the king in this one, man. That's just all there is to it. If you don't have youth on your roster, then you're not really doing it right. So that's why this guy's going so high, man. The age is a big deal. We've talked about this before on the podcast that age matters. If you're young, your value is going to shoot through the roof, even if you're equally as talented as someone who's old. So, I mean, the main question was why is he valued so high? It's age and the potential and what he's already done, as Drew was talking about his draft pedigree and how well he produced in college as well.
All right, so I don't have anything to add to that. Unless, Tyler, you've got anything, I'm going to move on. So let's move on to our next question. Comes from Lettuce on Reddit. It says, I'm starting up a Dynasty League this year, and I'd like to know your thoughts on the various sites, since I haven't picked one yet. Are any particularly good for Dynasty Leagues? And I feel like I can speak for all of us when I say it's MFL and then it's everybody else. I don't care what the cost is. They could double the cost for to operate per year, and I would still only use MFL because the only other one that's even legitimately decent at Dynasty is Flea Flicker, and it gives you an aneurysm anytime you're trying to do anything on the site. It's ridiculous, and it's a pain in the ass. Communicating with your league members is a horrible experience. And don't even get me started on ESPN or Yahoo, where you have to manage half your league stuff on an Excel spreadsheet for the off season. All your trades are done through email, and then you got to send it to the commissioner so he can update it on the Excel spreadsheet, and it's a nightmare. And the $6 or $7 per league member to pay for the site dues for MFL for my fantasy league make it just completely worth it. I would easily pay that and not have a second thought because I can't stand doing any inner sites.
Yeah, I mean, MFL is Aaron Rodgers, and the second best site is like EJ Manuel. We're like, yeah, you can get by, but you're not going to like it. And especially on the commish side of things. As a commissioner, MFL is unbelievable. You can make it do whatever you want. You can make it look however you want. You can run your schedule however you want. I mean, you can customize everything, and individual owners can customize the way they want it to look on their home screen. It doesn't have to look the same for everybody. They are by far and away the class of the dynasty sites. And if you're doing the league on MFL anywhere other than MFL, you're just doing it wrong, plain and simple. It just is what it is.
Use my fantasy league.
Hmm.
Yeah, to
That's my
finish
only.
Tyler's little comparison, if Leaf Flicker is EJ Manuel, then Yahoo and ESPN are TJ Yates and Blaine Gabbert.
Ooh, the Gabbert reference.
Uh, it's and especially with Blaine Gabbert. At one point, we all thought he was good, and well, that might be a bit of a stretch, but we all thought he could be good, and then we all grew up and we realized, we started playing Dynasty. We realized that those sites just don't cut it.
Yeah, it's not quite. And I was going to say the support. Just yesterday, I tweeted my fantasy league about a scheduling thing I was wanting to mess with, and they literally responded within like 30 seconds. And yeah, that's actually pretty typical. If you don't get a response super fast, you will get one within 20 minutes at the very most. And having that kind of support, and they care about their customers. They want you happy, and they take a lot of pride in their work. And hell yeah, they should be compensated for it. People want to bitch about the entry fee. Bitch all you want. I mean, these guys are doing a service. They are working their butts off. Just the guy that does the support is nonstop on Twitter. I mean, nonstop on Twitter. They'll hook you up with retweets if you're trying to fill openings. They'll answer any questions you have. If they can't answer it there, you'll go to another medium, and they'll answer it. They will make it right. And anytime I've had any issues, it's been cleared up rather quickly. Just pony up and pay the money, man. Even if it's a free league, even if everybody just pays $7 to cover the league's fee, the league fees, it's totally worth it. Totally worth it. So I guess we probably went a little overboard, but yeah, it's
Oh,
it's
you say we go
important.
overboard, but I actually have one more thing I want to say about it. The funny thing is, the only people that ever bitch about the cost for MFL are the people that don't use it. I rarely, if ever, have someone bitch about how much MFL costs after they've used it, especially when they've used another Dynasty site to compare it to, because the experience is night and day compared to other sites. And you talk about the support. I've consistently had the same experience. I've shot them messages on Twitter about just anything about the site. I was trying to have different setups for an auction, and I was just messaging them to see if it was even possible to do it. And they got back to me, like, yeah, we can't do that. But the fact they even took the time out of their day to respond to that is just awesome, because you're not going to get that with the other sites. And if you do, it's going to take them 3 days to get back to you. And I feel like if we talk about them anymore, we're gonna have to start requesting royalties. So let's move on to our next question. Comes from Chap in Grill Sergeant from Reddit. How does the rookie talent that'll be available in 2016 compare to the talent available in this year's rookie class? Which class is deeper at which positions? And Tyler and I have spoken on this a decent bit in the past, and I know Scott's not really going to have anything to add on this, but I think Tyler and I are in agreement that the top end talent, probably the top 4, 5, 6 players in this draft, in 2016's draft, are going to be better as a package than the top 5 or 6 players in the 2015 draft. But I do think that the depth going down to like the end of the third, start of the fourth is going to be deeper in the 2015 class.
And that's probably, at least at this moment, pretty true. Uh, I think the top 2 rounds of this coming draft are going to be super nice, man. A second rounder next year is going to be something you really, really want, especially given that we don't like to spend high draft picks on QBs. You could potentially get you a franchise QB in the second round next year, because we got about 4 or 5 coming out. Running back, at least at this moment, isn't as deep. And keep in mind, guys will emerge. They will come from completely off the radar. But running back's good up at the top with Zeke Elliott and Henry and Corey Clement, and to a little bit lesser degree, Thomas Tyner, who, things have kind of slowed down on the Thomas Tyner buzz. I still think he's a stud. wide receivers, there are 8 or 10 guys easily that I really like, and I'd be comfortable investing in today. Taking that leap of faith on them. So I am stoked about the 16 class. I was never super crazy about this 15 class. Obviously, I like the top end, and then I have my guys that I liked. But every time I get into the third round, even the late second, I'm just like, meh, whatever. It's been that kind of class for me.
Unless it
So,
takes Stephon Diggs.
Pat sniped me on Diggs. I passed him one too many times. I knew I shouldn't have, but I did.
And I feel like, saying the top end talent is deeper. I think it's to the extent that we could be looking at DeQuell Williams as a second round pick next year, just because with players emerging and players improving, I could see him being a second round pick without him having a bad 2015 season. And you're not going to get a DeQuell Williams in the 2015 second round unless you count Jalen Strong, and we would have to really expect him to break out.
I do count Jalen Strong as, come on, man. Strong's good to go. But, I mean, I don't even see Williams cracking the 5, no matter what. I mean, this class next year is legit at wide receiver. I mean, Boyd, Treadwell, Mike Williams, Corey Davis. I mean, there's some big-time talents coming out. Big time. Hopefully Boyd gets his shit together and doesn't turn into a knucklehead.
Terrible knucklehead. I swear, that boy makes me want to pull my hair out. And I hate referring to prospects and players as boy or kid, but when you want to act like a kid, when you want to act like you're stupid, I'm gonna call you a kid. Don't go out and get a DUI. It's dumb. I'm not gonna have another DUI rant. But Scott, you got anything to add on about the 2016 class?
I have seen 2 rookies, and they're okay.
Party.
There we go. That's Scott's contribution for the Devy front. All right, let's move on to our next question, and this comes from at something ABT FBT something about football, who's a good buddy of ours. It says, how do you win against someone who's also listening to the Dynasty Playbook? I don't know. Probably do more drugs than they're doing. I feel like we're pretty crazy, and there's not a lot of rhyme or reason to our strategy a lot of the times. Mostly our strategy is we love our guys, and we'll do anything we can to get our guys. But I don't know. I'll let Tyler try and take a more logical approach to it.
Well, a lot of it is know who our guys are and bait us. That happens to me quite a bit. They're like, and Scott even did it to me in one of our leagues where he takes Jalen Strong, and we all know what the end game is here. I'm trying to play hard to get, but we all know what's going to happen. So yeah, snipe me. Take the guy that you might not necessarily want because you know who I would want and snipe me, and then trade rate me. That's how you get ahead on me. Is you take my man crushes because I will go to the ends of the earth to get my guys and pretty much every time. If I want them, I'll pay what it takes.
What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, well, I think you have to do a little bit of your own research, basically. I mean, if you're playing against us, definitely just use everything we say against us. Just take it and harness it, write it down, have a book for each person. I mean, that's the only way to do it. But, yeah, I'd definitely just say do as much research as you can on your own, form your own opinions about players, find out who you think's going to explode, and go get them. Go get them for the cheap. That's what you got to do. You always got to find your guy, find out when he's on his lowest value, right before he's about to go up, obviously, and grab him then. Grab them all.
Yeah, and in terms of playing against guys who aren't actually us and who are just listening to the show, because it's hard to believe there's actually other people that listen to the show that aren't the 3 of us. But if you go up against somebody who listens to the Dynasty Playbook, to me, this is one of those. Ours is a strategy that kind of encourages go off your own board and We like to contribute as much information as we can, but it's not a set in stone strategy like kind of the UTH method or go and vet heavy. It's very much about playing the draft board based on what's there, and it's very youth focused, but not to the extent that you just want to outdo everyone else that's already trying to do the youth. If they're neglecting running back and TJ Yeldon's available late, grab TJ Yeldon. I don't care if I only have 2 or 3 wide receivers. If he's the best value, it's all about value for me. And it's not value in terms of what other people think it is. It's value according to my board, and that's the thing we want to kind of really emphasize here is have your own board, have your own values. And I mean that's kind of why we're here is we want to help people be able to figure out how to evaluate and value their own players, evaluate their own boards.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of nailed it. I mean, we are kind of the kings of planting the flag. When we love a guy, we love him. That flag's buried deep. But when we don't like him, Viking funeral. It's just like they're dead to us. And there's no point in the draft where I'm taking them. So, yeah, for me, our approach is kind of a no fear approach. Don't be afraid. Who cares what people say? Someone wants to criticize your draft pick or a trade or something like that, tell them to piss off. I mean, who cares? Do your thing. Take risks, take gambles, take the guys you want. Don't get stuck with a roster full of guys that you don't like and you don't want and you can't root for just because the rankings and the group think and everything else told you to do that. Just be you, man.
Yep, absolutely. It's all about, I do what I want. And it's like, well, why did you take Brandon Cooks at 112? Well, it's because I do what I want. Well, that was stupid. I do what I want. And, be willing to go down with the ship. Don't, if you're going to plant your flag, don't bitch out like a month and a half into it and try and flip. If you're going to commit to it, commit to it. And I almost feel like we really haven't answered this question, but I don't have an answer for this question because I don't even know how to win against somebody who has the exact same strategy and player values as me.
I think Chris probably being pretty tongue in cheek anyway, but it's a fun question though.
Oh yeah, I guess it's like drafting against Tyler, and I always just hope that I don't get stuck right next to him where he gets to draft twice before my next pick, so he can double snipe me. But I think with that, we'll move on to our next question. It comes from at Fantasy Outlaw, who Tyler, you just did a stint on their podcast, didn't you?
I did earlier today. Yeah, we did an IDP podcast, so it's pretty cool. I'll once we get the link up and stuff, it'll get tweeted out, I'm sure. So really, really cool guys. I was very thankful that they asked me to be on. Had a good time.
Yeah, what's the name of that podcast?
I don't know what the name of the podcast is. I bet I can find it out real quick, though.
All right.
I should be more well-researched, shouldn't I?
Probably, but what's the fun in that? I mean, I'd rather just shoot from the hip and do whatever.
I don't prepare for stuff. It is thefantasyreport.net. They're on iTunes, Stitcher, and you can listen to the podcast directly from their site as well. So, fantasyreport.net.
Good deal.
Really, really cool guys.
And his question is, what do you think of Lions IDPs? Losing Sue, does it help or hurt? Can another linebacker emerge? Tulloch, Whitehead, Van Noy? I think it's pretty clear that Levy is just heads and tails above everybody else. He's
so good.
And
he is. You don't think you see this big old beard, and you don't think he's going to be this like athletic guy. He is insanely athletic. So good. If he were a couple years younger, I'd have him right there with Kuechly and David in my rankings. That's the only thing keeping him down. I think I still have him in like LB4 or 5 or something like that. I love him. So anyway, sorry, had to throw that in there.
Nah, you're good. For me, if a second linebacker emerges, I think Tulloch and Whitehead both kind of emerged. They are fairly talented, but I think it was more because of opportunity, and I think Van Noy has just such a higher ceiling than either of them. Van Noy is a guy I'm buying into heavily as a deep stash, and I think he could easily outperform what either of them did on a per game basis last year. In terms of D linemen, losing Sue kind of hurts, but I don't think it's going to show on the IDP side of things. I think Ziggy Ansah is still a great pass rushing end to grab. I love Ziggy, and he's actually still in my top 5 defensive ends. And I know, I'm in the minority there, but his ceiling is as high as anybody else not named J.J. Watt or Robert Quinn, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, Stephen Tulloch, he's been around forever, and he's been that guy. I know we talked about Demario Davis a few weeks ago. This nice, say, low ceiling linebacker. That's kind of who Tulloch is, but he's getting up there, man. And he totally grammaticated his knee last year. Did a little jump up and down celebration, and boom, blew it out. Whitehead is okay. Van Noy is clearly the guy for me. And a lot of it's going to depend on scoring. Van Noy is going to be more of a Anthony Barr, Khalil Mack type, where he's not going to be a super consistent volume tackler, but he can put up some big plays. The dude's a hell of a pass rusher, and I'm really surprised that he is just so far under the radar, not necessarily of the dynasty community or the fantasy football community, but just in general, because he was so good at BYU. I mean, really good. Do yourself a favor and go look at some Kyle Van Noy highlights from the time that he was at BYU, and you will be impressed. The guy for me, and you can have him for a song, man. You can get him for a wink and a slap on the ass in the 40th round right now, because people seem to not even know who he is. So I'm all about Van Noy as the guy there. Losing fairly. Obviously, yeah, you lose 2 big old guys like that in the interior defensive line. It's a big deal. Ansah's clearly the guy on the defensive line. Jason Jones on the other side, nice defensive end. He's a little older. It's going to be an opportunity-based buy right there, but he's another guy that you can get for pretty cheap. That's a starting 4-3 defensive end in a conference that likes to wing it, or in a division that likes to wing it. So, yeah.
How do you feel about Nada? Obviously I'm not expecting Sue type numbers from him, but
no, and you're not going to get him. But not as another. I mean, he's been super consistent over his career, and in a DT eligible league, yeah, you're not going to hate having him in your lineup. I mean, are you going to get Geno Atkins 2012 numbers? Nah, it's not what you're going to get from him. But you're probably going to get 3 or 4 tackles with some sack upside. So he's not going to be a long-term stash by any means because he's an old dude. But, yeah, I mean, I like him just fine in a DT league.
Yeah, I think the loss of Sue is obviously going to hurt. Losing a big lineman like that, losing 2 interior linemen, it's going to affect you. I mean, I think it basically just makes the Lions' defensive line IDP very inconsistent, and you're not really sure where those points are going to come from. As far as linebackers go, I'm right with both of you guys. Kyle Van Noy is my guy. I was picking him up last year in all the leagues where he still wasn't picked up. I think it was like the 4th or 5th week of the season. I went through and grabbed him in like every league. I think he ended up starting like the 7th week of the season or something like that for 1 or 2 games. I think kid's uber talented. I think he's definitely going to be the one that breaks out. Not that the other guys, Tulloch and Whitehead, won't get any time or any play, but I think as the season progresses, Van Noy will kind of shine and hopefully get more touches than both the other 2.
Yeah. And with that, I think we'll move on to our last question. And this is actually a question we had last week as well. It comes from @Breeze IDP, our buddy Eric. And we actually answered the question wrong for what he wanted us to say. He wants to know who will be next year's Cooks or A-Rob, our man crushes, so we can get them now before the price skyrockets. Tyler and I answered it in the style of who are the rookies that are going to blow up that we want to, we need to have our hands on right now. And I think he wanted more kind of guys just in general that we have really high hopes for. And two guys that really stick out to me are Nelson Aguilar, because for anybody who hasn't listened to the show before, I heart Nelson Aguilar. He and I are homies. And then it's time to get back on the Michael Floyd train. His value can jump up back to close to what it was so easily. The upside is really it's legitimately wide receiver one, and the fact that he's going right now as the wide receiver 29. That's criminally low for a player that's as talented as he is. And those are two guys that, I'm snagging up now before their price just is through the roof.
Yeah, Aguilar was kind of the poster child for me too. That's the guy I was thinking of. Another guy, and a lot of this is going to be situationally dependent. So much unknown, but Cody Latimer. If anything breaks in Denver, Cody Latimer could be a third or fourth round startup pick next year. Hell, he's already going pretty dang high. So he could, he could see a surge. Dante Moncrief's another guy. A year from now, we could be looking at Andre Johnson's in the retirement home, T.Y. Hilton's somewhere else, because the X with Andrew Luck. And that in and of itself is going to sell some tickets right there. So those are a couple guys I was thinking of. But Aguilar out of this class is that guy that's very likely to do just that, because he's going to start day one. He's going to produce day one. And I wouldn't even be surprised to see Aguilar outpoint Amari Cooper this year, honestly.
Yeah, I like what you had to say there. I definitely think Cody Latimer is going to be someone that might explode. Being a big Denver fan, of course, I notice him. Also agree that Michael Floyd's someone that we need to get back on. I think he's still going to have a pretty good season. I'm hoping they start using him a little bit better this year. Maybe they'll actually have a healthy quarterback for a little while. That'll be nice as well. I think someone that people are kind of discounting, we've talked about it before, is Victor Cruz. I don't think it's really like a shock. He might still be more expensive than, well, definitely is more expensive than Cooks or A-Rob were at the beginning of last season, but he doesn't have nearly as much value as he had even a year ago, or 2 years ago, that's for sure. Someone else I think has a smaller chance of moving up the boards pretty quickly would be Marquez Wilson, Chicago. He's got a little bit to work through. Obviously, still got some talented wide receivers in front of him, but I think he could flourish in a slot role if he can get such an opportunity.
Yeah, I like Wilson as a good late round grab, because people were jumping all over him at the end of the season, and then as soon as Kevin White got in town, people just completely wrote him off, and I think that's they're being a little too quick on that, because worst case scenario, he goes somewhere else at the end of his contract and really gets to start somewhere. He puts on some weight, he could easily be what Alshon Jeffrey was. He's a big-bodied wide receiver. He's good at high pointing the ball. His metrics are off the friggin' chart. And another guy for me that his value's not as low right now, but it's lower than what it's gonna be, is Keenan Allen. I love me some Keenan Allen. I really do. And I think, I think he's gonna have a bounce back year this year, and he's gonna solidify himself as a second round startup pick again. And I don't think he's gonna be. I don't think you're gonna regret investing in him now.
Yeah, and you can get him now for way cheaper than what he was a year ago. And I think we found his absolute dead bottom floor last year, and it was still pretty good. It wasn't great. I mean, especially given what you paid for him in both Dynasty and Redraft, you were incredibly disappointed. But this is, it's not a game of inches in Dynasty. So I think we found Keenan Allen at his absolute worst last year. It's only going to get better. He's got a little bit of help out there now. They actually Might have a running game with the new guy, Melvin Gordon. Danny Woodhead will be healthy. That'll help. They got Stevie Johnson, who is quirky as all hell, but he's a nice wide receiver. That's going to take some pressure off. So, yeah, I'm all about it. I love Keenan Allen. I'm still not crazy. Even if that his price is lower, I'm still not crazy about it just because it feels like you get him for cheaper. But that youth insulates the price so well. But, you know, where I've got Keenan Allen, I've got him as like my 3 or my 4. I can't even imagine having a better 3 or 4 than Keenan Allen in Dynasty.
No, I'm all about it. Scott, you got anything else you want to touch on with this?
Nope, you guys all hit it. I'm all good.
All right, that's going to finish up our questions for the week, and we're going to move on to my rant of the week. And this one is fueled by a lot of the Twitter interactions I've seen lately, and I'm getting fucking sick of it. I know that there's all these opposing camps. There's the DLF camp, there's the UTH camp, there's the I do whatever I want camp. Can we all just, stop being teenage girls for a second and, whispering behind each other's backs, except we're all doing it live on Twitter? Can we have some testicular fortitude? If you have an issue with somebody, say it, be upfront and say it to them instead of just kind of whispering behind their back. And honestly, send them a DM. Don't do it in public. And I know that you think your strategy is right and somebody else thinks their strategy is right. There's not a right and a wrong way to play Dynasty. Do what you want to do. But instead of, talking shit and trying to break down, everybody else's strategy, why not just explain why your strategy works instead of trying to talk shit on someone else's strategy? I'd much rather Twitter be a place where we can foster different ideas and have conversations instead of it being this battleground of just bitching and moaning, and it kind of ruins it. And it's made me not want to go on Twitter as much, which I hate, because Twitter, when it's good, it's a blast, because it's by far the best place to really conversate about Dynasty ideas and to kind of cultivate new ideas or to really change how you think about things. But if it's going to become an unwelcome place to be, then you're kind of killing the whole Dynasty community.
Yeah, it went completely off the rails a few weeks ago and just got totally out of control. And it got personal, which that's just silly. I mean, this is a game. And when I first got on Twitter, I'd poke my nose in some of those conversations. But now I just open the door and walk in and walk right back out. I just don't want anything to do with it because I think nobody comes out ahead on those deals. Everybody just ends up looking like asses when it turns into just what is essentially a shouting match. I enjoy the productive conversations and the productive debates where each side can give their perspective and we can actually get somewhere. And like Drew said, there's no right or wrong. It's not black and white. Just, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's a good topic for a rant because it just went completely off the rails, and there were several individuals, all of whom I respect as members of the Dynasty community, and all who have good opinions and valid points. It just sometimes it isn't handled very correctly, and Twitter could not be a more public medium to throw dirt around, and nobody looks good. No, nobody's winning those deals.
Yeah, and it's just if people want to disagree, great. Have a productive conversation. Have a respectful conversation. I feel like we're all grown men and women. How hard is it to treat another person with respect? And obviously, if you're willing to put your opinion out there on Twitter, you have some conviction in your strategy or your belief system for how you play. So respect the fact that they're willing to put their ideas out there. instead of just bashing them unnecessarily. Yeah, this got kind of long-winded, but I just
Yeah, well, it's been the elephant in the room for a lot of leagues and a lot of people for several weeks now.
yeah, and honestly, I feel like it. I'm not saying that we're this beacon of you know of we're the shining example of what you should be, because far from it. And I don't even know that anybody that even is listening to this is going to apply to. But if one person hears it and rethinks how they act about it, then Twitter becomes a better place. But I think that's going to about do it for us. Guys, do you have any last parting shots for us?
Nope.
Don't be a butthole.
Yeah, there you go.
I
Don't
mean,
be a butthole.
it seems cliche and it seems like we just keep going back to that, but I think that kind of sums up the rant right there. Just don't be a butthole.
Really. I mean, I feel like it's a good, just a life lesson to live by. Just don't be a butthole. And guys, I mean, on a separate note, for everybody that is listening, we really appreciate everybody who takes the time to listen to us every week. We've exploded in terms of views every week since we started. Since Scott and Tyler joined in a few months ago, and it's really exciting to see kind of how many people are actually listening to our opinions, even though sometimes it feels like we just come on here and rant and bullshit for an hour. But we want to thank you guys for taking the time to listen in, and we hope you continue to listen in. If you guys have any feedback for us, you guys have a way you think the show could be better or just anything like that, feel free, send it our way. Send it to us in a private message. Send it out in the open. It doesn't really matter to me, but just in general, thanks guys for listening. This has been the Dynasty Playbook, your source for all sorts of Dynasty rants and maybe a little bit of Dynasty knowledge. I've been your host, Drew. You can find me on Reddit at EAF Marine and on Twitter at Drew Dodson NFL. With me have been my excellent co-hosts, Tyler and Scott. You can find Tyler on Reddit at Barles and on Twitter at HBombIDP. Scott, you can find on Reddit at Stewie35, and you can finally find him on Twitter at SportsFreak35. He's got a nice egg-shaped picture right now, so you don't have any idea what he looks like, but follow him anyways, and maybe he'll have something interesting to say. If not, you can just harass him, because that's always fun. Guys, it's been a blast this week. For everybody listening, thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you again next week.